The room exploded with laughter as Grandma handed a brand new iPad to Tyler. Then came Emma's turn, an envelope of crisp cash. One by one, the kids beamed. The stack of gifts looked like a tech store exploded on the carpet until it was my daughter's turn. She waited, quiet but hopeful, hands slightly outstretched like the others. Grandma reached into the last bag and pulled out a spiral-bound notebook, cheap, flimsy, a pack of 3 coloured pencils taped awkwardly to the front. "That's for your doodles," she said without looking up. Laughter stalled. Even the Christmas music in the background seemed to fade. My daughter glanced at me, confused, then quickly smiled again, polite. She always did that, especially when she didn't understand why things suddenly hurt. I reached for her hand. She squeezed it back, too tightly for a child who just got a gift. And that's when it all clicked. The years of silence, the little slights I shrugged off, the stories I told myself to protect what was left of family. It wasn't just me anymore. She wasn't just giving less. She was teaching my daughter what she thought she was worth. So I stood up, still calm, still smiling, and made a decision no one expected. The room would stay warm, the gifts would stay flashy, but something far more valuable was about to be taken back. I used to think she just liked boys more. When I was little, I'd watch Grandma laugh louder with my cousins, wrestle with them on the living room rug, hand them second cookies before they asked. Once, at a birthday party, I asked if I could help frost the cake. She smiled and said, "No, sweetie, that's a bit messy. Why don't you go read instead?" Then handed the frosting bag to Josh. He was 6. I was 8. That night, I told Mom I thought Grandma didn't like me. She tucked me in and said, "Sometimes people don't know how to love everyone the same. It doesn't mean they don't care." So I learned to smile harder, to make myself smaller, to try and earn warmth with good grades and quiet manners. But even as a kid, I could feel it in the way she touched my hair. Just a pat, not a caress, like she was smoothing something down instead of holding something dear. There's this photo from back then, one of those awkward family portraits where everyone wore matching red sweaters. I still remember how itchy mine felt. In the picture, I'm off to the side, half blocked by a potted plant. The boys are front and centre, arms around Grandma. She's beaming. It wasn't cruelty. It was preference, subtle, quiet, generational, the kind you can't name without sounding ungrateful. But it gets passed down. The way people value loud over thoughtful, assertive over sensitive, boys over girls. And it doesn't leave bruises, just imprints long after the sweaters no longer fit. So years later, when I saw my daughter holding that notebook, cheap, colourless, weightless, something ancient stirred inside me, a pattern repeating, a kindness withheld in just the same shape it was given to me. After that Christmas, I started noticing the smaller moments, ones I used to excuse, like how Grandma always asked about my brother's job, never mine, or how she complimented my cousin's wife's casserole, but said mine smelled interesting. It wasn't cruel. It was dismissive, like I was always close, but just off-centre, good, but not quite enough. She never remembered my daughter's favourite colour, kept buying pink, even though she hadn't liked it since kindergarten. But she remembered Tyler's love for Lego sets down to the model number. Once, at a barbecue, she leaned over and whispered, "You really should teach her to smile more. She looks too serious for a little girl." My daughter heard. She didn't cry. She just turned to me and said, "But you said my serious face is my smart face." I didn't know how to answer that, so I said nothing, like I always did. The rest of the family didn't see it, or pretended not to. "She's just old-fashioned," they said. "She doesn't mean anything by it." But that's what made it harder. Because favouritism doesn't need a villain. It just needs silence and repetition, the worst part. My daughter began repeating my old tricks, sitting straighter, speaking softer, watching others get praised while telling herself it didn't matter. I saw her hiding her drawings after Grandma's comments. I saw her pretending she didn't want to join the other kids, and I knew that look in her eyes, not anger, not sadness, but that quiet calculation. What do I need to do to be enough? It built slowly, one half-swallowed sigh at a time. I found myself driving home from visits with clenched fists on the wheel, memorizing every small slight so I wouldn't gaslight myself later. She didn't mean it. She's just tired. She's from another time. But if time teaches us anything, shouldn't it teach us to grow? It was supposed to be a small lunch. Grandma invited us to her house. Just the girls. No fuss, she said, just family. She had made place cards, little folded ones with our names, except my daughter's was missing. She tried to laugh it off. It's okay, Mommy. Maybe I can just sit on your lap. Grandma chuckled. Well, maybe she can share with Claire. She's smaller, after all. Claire was 6. My daughter was 10. And in that moment, something cracked. Not in rage, but in clarity. I stood in the kitchen and watched Grandma scoop out ice cream, 3 bowls, 1 for Claire, 1 for Lily, 1 for herself. She looked up at me. Oh, I didn't think she liked vanilla, my daughter's favourite flavour. My child didn't say a word. She just walked over, grabbed her sketchbook from her backpack, and sat alone on the stairs, drawing, silent, composed. Too composed. I knelt beside her. She looked up and whispered, "Did I do something wrong?" I didn't answer. I just held her close and whispered, "No. You're perfect. We're just not going to do this anymore." The next day, I told the family we'd be taking some space. No holiday plans, no explanations, just space. They called it dramatic, said I was overreacting, that I'd break Grandma's heart. But I wasn't trying to hurt her. I was trying to protect mine. I didn't slam any doors, didn't write any long letters. I just stopped showing up. And it was the first time in my life that absence felt like power. The silence after we left was loud, but not empty. It gave me room to hear myself again. No more background noise of, "You should have," or, "Why can't you just me?" And her, and mornings that began without dread. I started waking up early. Not out of obligation, but curiosity. I reopened my Etsy shop, just digital prints at first, quotes, little affirmations, soft colours, clean fonts. I didn't think anyone would buy, but someone did, then someone else. And I remembered, I used to love creating, before I became too sensitive. Before I was told that art wouldn't pay the bills, my daughter started drawing again too. More animals, more fierce lines, less hiding. One day, she showed me a sketch of a lioness. Underneath, she'd written, "Not bossy, just brave." I wanted to cry, but I didn't. I just printed it and framed it above our little desk. We shared that desk. 2 girls, 2 cups of tea, 2 minds rebuilding quietly on our own terms. Nobody asked how we were doing. Not Grandma, not my siblings, not even my dad. But that was okay. Because for once, I wasn't hustling to prove anything to anyone, just to us. We learned how to celebrate small wins. 1 Etsy order meant pancakes. 2 meant a new brush set. 3 in a day. That called for ice cream. Vanilla. Always vanilla. Some nights I'd sit on the couch watching her sketch with her knees tucked up, and I'd feel something I hadn't in years. Peace. Not excitement, not revenge, not even closure. Just peace. And it was enough to keep going. It started with a message from someone I didn't know. "Hi, I saw your print on Pinterest. Do you offer custom orders?" I paused, then typed back, "I do now." Her name was Marla. a small bookstore owner in Oregon. She wanted prints for her reading nook. Soft, strong quotes by women, earth tones, minimalist. 3 days later, she ordered 20 and featured me on her Instagram. I gained 400 followers overnight, not much by internet standards, but to me, it felt like Times Square. That weekend, I let my daughter stay up late. We both worked on packaging. I tied ribbons. She added stickers. And when I sealed the box, she whispered, "Maybe we're a business now." I didn't correct her. She was right. We were. An old college friend messaged next. "I didn't know you were doing art again. These are stunning." She shared one on her story. Then another order came in. Not explosive, just steady, like a heartbeat. And every ping was a reminder that I was not invisible. The school hosted a small vendor fair. Parents could apply. I almost didn't, but my daughter handed me the form. You should show them what you do. She even drew the sign. Soft Power Studio with a little lioness in the corner. That day, a teacher stopped at our table. Then, the principal. By the end of the fair, we had sold out of prints, not because I convinced anyone, but because people finally saw something I wasn't hiding. It wasn't fame, it wasn't money, but it was visibility. And after years of being the difficult daughter, or the quiet one in the background, visibility felt revolutionary. I wasn't loud, wasn't flashy, but I was there. In every line I drew, every word I printed, every package sealed with care, and people were noticing. It didn't happen in a single moment, not like in movies. No dramatic haircut, no viral post, just small things, quiet shifts. I started saying no. No to rushed deadlines, no to last-minute favours from people who only called when they needed something. And I didn't feel guilty. I stopped explaining myself, stopped apologising for not being at family dinners, for not texting back immediately, for building something slowly. I didn't owe anyone a report. My wardrobe changed too, not because I wanted to impress, but because I finally asked, what do I feel good in? Soft knits, warm neutrals, simple lines. No more clothes that looked like someone else's daughter. At the post office one afternoon, the woman at the counter said, "You always look so calm." I smiled, not because I agreed, but because I'd earned that calm. Built it brick by brick. At school pickup, one of the mums said, "Your daughter is so sure of herself. She speaks like she knows who she is." I looked at her walking toward me, backpack slung low, smudges of ink on her fingers, and I realised maybe she did, because I was finally giving her an example of what that could look like. We weren't flashy, we didn't post much, but we had a rhythm, print, pack, ship cook, read, sketch. It wasn't big success, but it was a big shift. When my sister messaged about Mum's birthday, I didn't panic, just read it, sat with it, and wrote back, "We won't be coming. But thanks for thinking of us. No need to explain, no passive aggression, just truth." That night, I tucked my daughter in and she whispered, "I like us." I kissed her forehead, turned off the light, and stood in the doorway a while. "I like us too," I whispered back. It came on a Wednesday. Not a holiday, not a birthday, just a text from my sister. "Mum's planning a big dinner. Everyone's coming. She said you and Ellie should be there too." No emojis, no awkward buffer, just a sentence that felt like a pebble dropped into still water. I stared at the message. Not angry, not afraid, just confused. It had been almost 2 years since Ellie and I had been included in anything. 2 years of silence, punctuated only by indirect jabs, holiday photos we weren't in, and stories that reached me through someone else's someone else. I showed Ellie. She read it, then looked at me. "Do you want to go?" Her voice wasn't scared, just curious, mature for 10. I didn't answer right away. Just sat with the feeling. That night, while making dinner, I kept thinking of that Christmas. The one where Ellie opened nothing, while her cousins squealed over tablets and money. The one where my mum smiled and said, "I just did what I thought was best for each child." The one where Ellie's smile cracked halfway through the ham. I remembered standing in the kitchen, holding my breath as I packed her tiny overnight bag with socks and silence. That was the last time we went, the last time I let them define what my daughter was worth, and yet now, 2 years later, they wanted us back. Why? Guilt? Pressure from someone else? Or something else entirely? I didn't know. But I wasn't the same woman they last saw, and Ellie wasn't the same little girl. I didn't answer the text that day. Instead, I printed an old photo. Ellie and me, holding paintbrushes, half covered in clay and laughter. I taped it to the fridge as a reminder we were already enough, invited or not. That night, I lay awake longer than usual. The invitation sat in my phone like a lit candle, quiet, but impossible to ignore. I wasn't scared of seeing them again. I was scared of forgetting how it felt to finally breathe without proving myself. Ellie brushed her teeth with one hand, the other holding a crayon sketch she hadn't finished. She looked at me through the mirror. "If we go, will you let me sit next to Grandma this time?" I paused, then asked, "Why would you want to?" She shrugged, cheeks full of toothpaste foam. Because maybe she forgot. And sometimes people remember better when you're close. I didn't know whether to cry at her grace or be angry that she still believed people could change just because she wanted them to. I took the next morning off work, made tea, pulled out a notebook. On one side, I wrote, "Reasons to go." Ellie wants to try again. Maybe things are different, maybe I'm different on the other. Reasons not to. Memory doesn't always equal change. I owe no one proof of growth. What if she gets hurt again? I stared at the list. It didn't help, because the truth was, this wasn't about logic. It was about a voice inside me that said, "You have nothing to prove, but maybe you have something to reclaim." I called my therapist just to hear it out loud. She said, "The point isn't whether they change. The point is whether you can walk into that room and still belong to yourself." Later that afternoon, Ellie left me a note on the fridge. One of her drawings, a big dinner table, but this time we were both there. She'd drawn herself holding a sunflower. Me? A teacup. That was our code for calm. So I picked up the phone, typed one sentence, "We'll come, just for dinner," and hit send. I exhaled. Not in surrender, not in fear, but in readiness. I didn't need a plan for revenge, but I needed a plan for peace. The kind of peace you wear, like soft fabric under armour, invisible to others, but close to your skin. The first thing I did was teach Ellie how to make our tea, the way I like it, the way we like it. Chamomile, with a splash of oat milk. It sounds silly, but passing that little ritual to her felt like handing her a shield. Next, I chose what to wear. Nothing flashy, just clean lines, a linen blouse in soft grey, and the same colour as that first teacup print I sold. It reminded me that I built something from scratch while everyone else was too busy ignoring me. I didn't tell anyone we were coming. Not my siblings, not my father. Let them be surprised or uncomfortable. Either reaction was fine. Ellie, of course, wanted to bring a gift. She made a card, folded construction paper, drew sunflowers and the words "Merry Feelings," even on hard days. She said it was for Grandma. I almost stopped her, but then I remembered this visit wasn't about control. It was about showing up without shrinking. I packed a small bag, just in case we needed to leave early, not because I expected drama, but because this time I refused to sit through anything that cost us our peace. Before we left, I poured myself one last cup of tea. The mug said, "Still here." I looked at it, smiled, and whispered to myself, "Yes, I am." The drive was quiet. Not heavy, not tense, just still. Ellie hummed in the back seat, holding her card like a treasure. I glanced at her in the mirror. She smiled, and in that moment, I knew whatever happened next. We weren't walking in as the same people they once walked over. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was always that tight. Or maybe I'd just outgrown the corners where I used to fold myself. Ellie held my hand, firmly, like we were walking into something we could choose to walk out of. Her sunflower card peeked out of her jacket pocket. She had drawn a little smiley face in the bottom right corner, not for them, for herself. We didn't knock. The front door was half open. Like always during holidays, warm light spilled onto the steps. Laughter drifted out, wrapped in scent of cinnamon and clove. I stepped inside, 1 foot on hardwood, and the room froze. Just a little. My sister glanced over first. Blink. Then her hand tightened on her wineglass. Dad looked up from the couch and said nothing, not even a shift in posture. It was Grandma who stood up fully, as if she wasn't sure what she was seeing. Ellie walked forward, calm, polite, unbothered, like she'd been practicing this all along. "Hi, Grandma," she said softly, and handed her the card. There was a pause, longer than it should have been. Grandma took the card, eyes flickering. Her lips moved like she was about to speak, but then stopped. She nodded, barely, then turned away as if someone had called her. No one had. Ellie came back to me and took my hand again. I squeezed it. She squeezed back. That moment, that tiny act of return, was louder than any welcome could have been. We found seats at the edge of the room, not quite invisible, but not in the photos either. I didn't mind. I wasn't here for the centre. I was here to hold space for Ellie, for me, for the version of us who used to flinch at half-closed doors. And as the party resumed, small talk bubbling, plates clinking, fake laughter rising, I leaned into my chair, exhaled, and thought, we're here, not to be noticed, just to exist, and that, for now, was revolutionary. The dining table had expanded, an extra leaf in the centre, new chairs borrowed from neighbours, but still mismatched. I noticed my name was missing. No place card, no seat with a sprig of rosemary and gold-rimmed plate. Ellie had one, pushed far to the end, next to the kitchen counter, where the dishwasher hummed behind her. Someone said, "Grace." Someone passed wine. Someone laughed too loud. The chairs creaked like they didn't want to be there. Neither did I. My sister gave a toast to family showing up, to tradition, to never letting grudges win. She never looked at me, not once, but Grandma did. A glance, sharp and quick, like checking a wound she thought had closed. The roast went around, then the mashed potatoes, then the green beans in Grandma's crystal bowl. I passed each without reaching. Ellie quietly pulled a bread roll, offered me one, and smiled. That was enough. Small talk flickered across the table. Someone got a promotion. Someone booked a cruise. Someone got a new dog with a weird name. No one asked what Ellie liked in school. No one asked where I worked now. They spoke around us like we were part of the wallpaper. Then came the gifts. Each grandkid handed Grandma something, a mug, a drawing, a tiny box with earrings. She made the right faces, said the right thanks, gave the right hugs. Ellie stood up, held something behind her back, a flat canvas, painted sunflowers, again. This time, a row of them, all reaching toward one smaller, gentler bloom. She walked over to Grandma and handed it without a word. There was a pause. Grandma stared at it. She opened her mouth to say something, then closed it. She nodded again. No hug, no comment. Just, I'll put it somewhere safe. And Ellie returned, still smiling. But I saw the shift, her shoulders lower, her eyes dimmer, her silence heavier. I reached under the table, held her hand, and I knew. This was the moment we both stopped pretending this family had space for us. Even when the chairs multiplied, even when the table grew longer. Some people still sit outside the circle. Dessert came, apple pie, store-bought, still warm, but not from love. Ellie took a small slice. I declined. No one noticed, except her. She leaned closer, whispered, "You okay, Mama?" I smiled, half of it real. Then it came, the sentence, spoken not to me, but loud enough for everyone. Grandma laughed, sipping tea, and said, "I just hope Ellie doesn't grow up too sensitive. It's not a good look on girls." Silence. Forks froze. Chewing stopped. Ellie blinked. She didn't understand all the words, but she understood the tone. I reached for her hand. She looked at me, waiting to know if she should laugh or shrink. "She's not sensitive," I said, voice calm but sharp. "She's observant." The air shifted. Chairs creaked again. The old ones always betray tension. My sister tried to change the subject, talked about her new oven, said it had voice control. No one cared. Grandma didn't respond, just sipped again, as if silence was victory. I stood up, walked over to Ellie's plate, and gently took her half-eaten pie away. She looked up, surprised. I said, "We're full." She nodded, trusted me, as always. We walked to the door, no coat, no shoes yet, but we paused. And that's when I turned, looked at the table and said it. "I paid off your mortgage last year, and I've just submitted the cancellation." One sentence, toned like honey, dropped like thunder, eyes widened. My sister gasped. Grandma opened her mouth. But no sound came. I opened the door. The cold rushed in. Ellie reached for her coat and smiled. This time, fully. Sometimes, the only way to unlearn what they've taught us is to walk away before dessert is finished. We stepped outside. The door clicked behind us. No one followed. The porch was still strung with lights, those soft golden ones that pretend everything is warm. Ellie tugged her coat tighter. Then she looked up at me, eyes searching. "Are we in trouble?" she asked. I shook my head. "Not even close." We walked down the steps. My heels clicked across the brick path, sharp and certain. Ellie skipped once to catch up, then fell into step beside me. Behind us, the windows glowed. A silhouette moved past the kitchen. Maybe my sister, maybe Grandma, but no one opened the door. No one said wait. That used to hurt. This time, it just confirmed I was right to go. Halfway to the car, I stopped. There, in the passenger seat, was a single unopened box, Ellie's real gift. Wrapped in brown craft paper, tied with a red ribbon she had chosen herself. I meant to leave it at Grandma's, let it prove a quiet point. But now, I reached for it and handed it to Ellie. "Merry Christmas, love." She opened it slowly. Inside, a drawing set, the good kind, brush pens, jewel tips, soft paper, and a letter. Just a note, really. She pulled it out and read, "You are not invisible. You are art." Her breath caught. She folded the note, pressed it to her chest. "I like our Christmas better," she whispered. I got in the car, started the engine. Snow began to fall, just lightly. Through the windshield, the house still glowed, still looked perfect, but now I saw it for what it really was, a stage set for everyone but us. And we weren't playing that part anymore. I drove. No radio, no rush, just the sound of my daughter humming softly beside me, sketchbook open on her lap. The road blurred in the falling snow, but I wasn't looking outside. I was somewhere else, years ago, sitting in a different car. I must have been about Ellie's age, curled up in the back seat of my mum's Honda. It was Christmas Eve. I had wrapped a drawing for Grandma myself, folded it into red paper I found in the recycling bin, tied it with my shoelace. I remember holding it all the way to her house, smiling the whole drive. When we got there, I ran in first, slipped on the doormat, but still held the gift up proudly. Grandma barely looked. She took it, nodded, and placed it on a pile of others. Never opened it. Later that night, she gave me a bath soap sampler, said I looked like I could use it. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the feeling. I was 7. But that was the year I learned what it meant to be optional. Back in the present, Ellie leaned her head on the window. The drawing set on her lap was already open, a half-finished sketch blooming from the first page. She didn't ask why we left. She didn't say Grandma's name. She just drew, quiet, focused. And in that moment, I realised something. She would remember this night too, not for what she didn't get, but for what she was finally allowed to leave behind. I glanced down at the dashboard. Outside temperature, 23 degrees. Inside, silent, peaceful. That night in my mum's car, I remember how cold it was. Even with the heater on full, the silence felt different, empty. But this time, it was full of breath and warmth and choice. Ellie looked up. "Do you think Grandma will be mad?" I took a moment, then shook my head. "She doesn't get to decide how we feel anymore." Ellie smiled, the kind that stays in the eyes, then kept drawing, and for the first time in years, I realised I was no longer stuck in the memory. I was rewriting it, for her, for me, for both of us. We stopped by the park on the way home. Ellie wanted to stretch. So did I, though neither of us said it aloud. The snow had softened into a quiet drizzle. Benches glistened, lights from nearby houses shimmered like quiet apologies across the icy pond. Ellie sat on the swing, cupping her hands around the sketchbook. Her little fingers traced the cover like it was something sacred. And in that moment, I saw it differently. That cheap notebook wasn't an insult anymore. It was a symbol, not of what Grandma gave, but what we could turn pain into. I sat beside her, watched as she flipped to the back page. She tore it out slowly, carefully, and handed it to me. On the page, she had drawn us, side by side, standing in the snow, holding hands under the stars, and beside us, a little table with all the presents from earlier, except in her version, they were made of clouds, transparent, floating. The only thing solid was us. I folded the page gently and slipped it into my coat pocket. Then I reached into my purse and pulled out the notebook, the one Grandma gave. Ellie looked at it, not with resentment, but with soft curiosity. "You keeping it?" she asked. I shook my head, then walked to the trash can near the path, but I didn't drop it in. Instead, I tore the notebook in half, page by page, slowly, deliberately, not angrily, just finally, the paper fluttered into the bin like loose feathers. Back at the swing, Ellie watched silently, then smiled. We didn't need to make a scene. We didn't need a confrontation. We just needed that quiet act of reclaiming something. On the way home, Ellie leaned against me, and as I reached into my coat pocket and felt the folded drawing, soft and warm from body heat, I realised something simple, the most valuable thing given that Christmas wasn't tech or cash. It was that drawing from that girl on a piece of paper worth more than all the iPads in the world. The heater in the car hummed softly, but I barely noticed. Ellie was asleep in the back seat, head tilted, one crayon still clutched in her fingers. She must have dozed off drawing. Again, I glanced at the folded paper in my coat pocket, the one she had given me, us under the stars, gifts made of clouds, and suddenly A flash. Not of this Christmas, of another. Many years ago, I was 7. It was snowing then too. Grandma's house was warm, but I remember feeling cold. My cousins tore into their presents. Walkie-talkies, scooters, digital pets. I unwrapped mine. A second-hand sweater and a half-used sticker book with a bent cover. I smiled anyway, because I had learned even then, you're supposed to be grateful. You love art, right? She said cheerfully. Like that explained everything. Like that made it fair. That day, I had drawn something too. A little girl with her hands behind her back, watching others open gifts. She was smiling. But I remember pressing the pencil so hard the paper tore. I never showed it to anyone, just folded it and stuffed it under my mattress. It stayed there for years, until I moved out, and tossed it with the rest of my childhood. But tonight, watching my daughter sleep, I realised she had drawn almost the same image, but reversed. Her version showed a girl standing in the snow, but this time there was someone beside her, me. And in that simple act, she rewrote something I didn't even know needed healing. The past doesn't vanish, it echoes, but when she handed me that drawing, she didn't just give me a picture. She gave me a memory rewritten in her own soft, colourful lines. And for the first time, my childhood finally exhaled. The next morning, the snow had frozen over. Everything was still. Even the sky looked tired. Ellie tiptoed down the stairs in her pyjamas, carrying a mug of cocoa she had made herself. Her version of peace. She handed it to me without a word. I took a sip. It was way too sweet, but I smiled. Maybe some things don't need fixing, just softening. A message pinged on my phone. It was from my sister. Just a photo. Grandma sitting alone at the table, a plate of untouched cookies in front of her. No caption, no explanation. Just a digital echo of the night before. I stared at it for a long time and didn't feel anger. Not anymore. I walked to the kitchen drawer, pulled out the envelope. The one labelled property, escrow release. I had requested it months ago, after I paid off their mortgage in full, quietly, anonymously. The house was in my name. They didn't know that. Not yet. I held the envelope, felt its weight. Paper that could humble or heal. Then I grabbed a pen. I wrote 2 words on the back. No debt. And added a line beneath. But don't call me again. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. A boundary drawn not in bitterness, but in ink. Ellie watched from the hallway. She didn't ask. But later, as I tucked her into bed, she whispered, "Are we still mad?" I paused, then said the simplest truth I knew. No. Just done. She nodded and pulled the blanket up to her chin, then added, "Good, 'cause I like how quiet it feels now." Forgiveness isn't always loud. It doesn't always come with tears or hugs. Sometimes it's just the absence of the need to explain anymore. It's when you realise you don't owe anyone your hurt. A week passed. The snow melted. The world moved on like nothing had cracked. I didn't hear from them again. No apology, no justification. And that was fine. One quiet afternoon, I was walking Ellie home from school when she tugged my sleeve. She pointed across the street to a car we didn't recognise, parked outside our mailbox. Inside, a woman sat still, hands gripping the steering wheel, her eyes hidden behind oversized sunglasses. It was Grandma. She didn't get out. She didn't wave. She just looked and looked at the two of us, walking slowly, one hand holding the other. I kept walking. So did Ellie, but just before we turned the corner, I glanced back. The car was gone. Later that evening, I went to check the mailbox. Inside was a package. No sender name, just our address, handwritten with shaky strokes. I opened it carefully. Inside a familiar spiral-bound notebook, but this time the cover had been replaced, wrapped in soft faux leather. Ellie's name etched in gold, and a pencil case, not fancy, but thoughtful, neat rows of coloured pencils inside. One corner was smudged with what looked like tear marks, or maybe just water. I stood there for a while, not crying, not angry, just still. That night, I placed the notebook on Ellie's shelf without a word. She saw it the next morning and didn't ask who it was from. She just smiled and said, "I think I'll draw today." Then ran to her desk like it was the first time she believed her colours could be enough. Some ghosts don't ask to come back. They just hope that you'll remember something other than the hurt. And sometimes you do. Just not out loud. I used to think forgiveness was about words. An apology, a conversation, a final scene where everything is neatly tied. But now I know. Sometimes it's quieter than that. Sometimes forgiveness is letting your daughter draw without telling her the story behind the paper. It's choosing not to tell her what Grandma said behind closed doors, what she never got for birthdays, or what was really meant that Christmas. It's watching her colour with a smile that's still bright and letting that be enough. That spiral notebook still sits on her desk. Some pages are crumpled, some filled with imaginary creatures and rainbow cities. One page just has the words, "Me and Mommy holding hands." I never told her who gave it back. I never will. But sometimes, when she's asleep and I pass by her room, I pause and whisper, "Keep drawing, baby. Your story's going to be beautiful." Because in the end, it's not about the gift, or the money, or even the notebook. It's about who she becomes when she's no longer waiting for approval from someone who never saw her clearly. So now I ask you, if someone hurt the people you love, not with fists, but with silence and favouritism, would you walk away? Or would you quietly write the ending yourself?